Services are held for victims of the terrorist shooting attack in El Paso, Texas. Mexico's government accounts for 107 Mexican nationals detained during 7 Mississippi raids. And an exclusive interview with former presidential candidate in Guatemala, Telma Cabrera. Hello and welcome to Telesur English. I am Estefania Bravo. This is From the South. Protests are taking place in Guatemala this week as tensions rise ahead of the country's runoff election on Sunday. The Campesino social organization Codeca has been protesting for the annulment of the first round of the elections, which just stays until Guatemala's second round of voting, and both the former director and the former assistant of the director of the country's electoral court have been arrested for fraud. And as part of our ongoing exclusive election coverage, our correspondent Rolando Segura spoke exclusively to Telma Cabrera, Guatemala's former presidential candidate and human rights defender, on this Sunday's elections.
Greetings from Guatemala. The voting process is nearing, one which will define who the next president of Guatemala will be. And with us today is former presidential candidate Telma Cabrera, which is a human rights defender and an environmental rights defender. My first question is, why did you make the electoral fraud accusation, and why did you make the call for demonstrations this week?
As the people of Guatemala, we once again state and publicly denounce the fraud which took place in Guatemala, because the two parties which remain are being imposed on the people. We make the call to all people to join, because the right to elect and the right to be elected were violated.
But why the necessity of a plurinational state in Guatemala?
In the current context, we don't have a state. There is a corrupt, failed state, one in which the people have no participation. We have been made invisible. We're talking about the Mayas, the Garifunas, the Xincas, and Mestizos. It's important to write a new political constitution where all of the cohabiting peoples of Guatemala are present in that constitution. They violate our rights because of the manner in which we are absent from the Constitution. That better way of life which we are proposing would be to live in peace with Mother Earth, with nature, to have a dignified life, and earn a dignified salary, that our territories be respected, that the rights of Mother Earth be respected, which is now being contaminated. The people deserve a life in which there is a participatory, communal democracy which is representative, in which the people have that right to elect and be elected.
Moving on, Mexico's government has announced that 107 of its citizens were detained during 7 Mississippi raids on Thursday. The Foreign Ministry ensures that all of its citizens who were detained can rely on consulates and assistance from the government throughout their legal process.
Upon learning of the operation yesterday, we requested information from the United States authorities regarding the identities of our connationals, and we ordered our consulates to deploy to the sites in order to be able to identify the Mexican nationals. We have already confirmed that 107 Mexicans have been detained during this operation. At this moment, personnel from our consulate in New Orleans are attending to our connationals in Mississippi as well as in other locations.
In total, 683 people were arrested during the immigration raids at 7 food processing plants in and around Jackson, Mississippi. 600 ICE agents went to different factories and prevented workers from leaving in the largest raid over the last decade. Officers demanding identification and the migratory status of employees and only let out those who had all legally required papers. The raids were carried out in an area populated by primarily Mexican workers. Meanwhile, the children of the arrested migrants were left behind. Many cried in the streets as strangers tried to comfort them. Neighbors were said to be taking them to a local gym for the night. Our correspondent in Washington, Alina Duarte, provides us with a bit more context.
Yesterday, the largest raid in the U.S. over the last 10 years took place in the state of Mississippi. 680 undocumented people were arrested, some of which were actually U.S. citizens. According to the Washington Post, once they provided their migratory status, they were released. The prosecutor of the Southern Mississippi District, Michael Hurst, a Republican, said that the United States is a country of migrants, but also a country with laws, and he said that they would continue enforcing the law. Images which were seen yesterday over social media were of children who were abandoned. They were left completely alone as their parents were transported to detention centers. The kids, of course, did not know where they were being taken or if they'd be able to see them again. This is within a context of racism and xenophobia, which is in the public discourse, especially following this weekend, when shooting massacres took place, specifically in Dayton, Ohio, and El Paso, Texas, the latter in particular because of its racial hatred motivations, hate towards the Latino Hispanic community within the United States. Yesterday, demonstrators were in the streets of both cities during the visits of President Donald Trump, who they say is in part responsible for these tragedies for his role in spreading hate messages from the White House.
We thank Alina Duarte for that report. A Mexican school teacher who was killed in the El Paso terrorist shooting attack has been laid to rest in Ciudad Juarez. 57-year-old Elsa Mendoza Marquez was a dual U.S. and Mexican citizen and was a principal at a Ciudad Juarez school. She was with her husband and son on the way to the airport and made a quick stop to run into Walmart at the time of the shooting. She would have been traveling to meet her daughter that day. Elsa and her husband had moved to El Paso 10 years ago to flee violence.
It's important to highlight that it hurts us a lot. It's shocking because teacher Elsa was a great human being. The truth is that it is a huge pain and concern that fills us people from Juarez and El Paso with uncertainty and pain.
We no longer know where we are safe.
A note addressed to the U.S. Embassy in Mexico reiterates Mexico's condemnations of the acts perpetrated against Mexican citizens over the weekend in El Paso. The letter says that hate speech should have no place within society, nor should white supremacy. Moving on, Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro has instructed the government's delegation to not attend the next round of Norway-facilitated talks with the opposition in Barbados. This as a result of the opposition's support for the latest United States unilateral coercive measures. On Monday, the U.S. froze all Venezuela's assets and prohibited its citizens and businesses from making transactions with the South American country.
I proposed permanent dialogue for the talks in Barbados with a fixed agenda. But this week, the imperialist United States has gone crazy. They've stabbed the soul of Venezuela, our economy, and even celebrated the move. Under these conditions, I say no to talks.
Venezuelans demonstrated on Wednesday in rejection of the illegal blockade imposed on the Bolivarian country by the United States. The mobilization also commemorated the Battle of Boyacá, a decisive battle in Simón Bolívar's campaign to liberate Nueva Granada from Spanish rule. The Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America issued a statement firmly rejecting the U.S.'s economic blockade. ALBA says the move is a new escalation of illegal, coercive, and unilateral measures. The document calls for Washington to abide by the principles of international law. And the Caribbean Movement for Peace and Integration is urging the region to reject the hostile actions against Venezuela by the U.S. and support the democratic government led by President Nicolás Maduro. On Wednesday, General Secretary David Denny condemned the latest blockade against Venezuela. Denny also slammed the U.S. court ruling which permitted Canadian company Crystalex International to attach Venezuelan oil company Citgo to its portfolio, effectively stealing over $18 billion of the country's assets. Coming up after the break, Barbados has welcomed Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta and his wife for a 3-day official visit. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. We go to Brazil now, where around 70 legislators from 12 political parties across the political spectrum marched to the Supreme Court demanding they block the transfer of former President Lula da Silva to a prison for violent offenders. Our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Brian Muir, has more.
At 10 a.m. on Thursday morning, a local district judge in the city of Curitiba in southern Brazil named Carolino Lebos issued a transfer order to remove former President Lula from the solitary confinement in the Curitiba Federal Police Headquarters, where he's been held since April 2018, to the São Paulo state prison system. Now, some people at this moment thought this was a good sign because it showed that his case might be being pulled away from jurisdiction of the Lava Jato task force, which leaked telegram conversations published in The Intercept revealed to have acted illegally last year, arresting him with no material evidence deliberately to remove him from the presidential elections and open the path to victory for far-right President Jair Bolsonaro. About an hour later, however, Lula's defense team issued a statement announcing that they had not made the transfer request and that they were worried they would open the door for the São Paulo government to put Lula in a common prison in a cell with violent offenders. At this point, Lula's daughter said she was afraid that her father might be killed if this happened, and there was a huge outpouring of support on social media like Twitter in solidarity with the former president. Shortly thereafter, a group of 70 congresspersons in Brasilia from 12 different political parties, including right-wing parties that had initially supported Jair Bolsonaro's presidential run, stormed the Supreme Court and demanded that they do something to block the transfer of the former president. And Supreme Court Justice Gilmar Mendes issued the order to cancel the transfer order.
We thank Brian for that report. In Colombia, a special protection committee has been launched to monitor and implement the protection of 15 indigenous communities in the department of Putumayo. Meanwhile, the local ombudsman is calling on the government of Iván Duque to take the risk these communities are facing seriously.
Putumayo's ombudsman demanded that the government take his office early warning seriously and complies with a constitutional court order which calls for the protection of indigenous people in Putumayo.
Throughout 2017 and 2018, we used 4 early alerts, and I want to repeat that the early alerts are not only meant to be discussed, but to be abided by. But the government doesn't like early alerts.
Similarly, the United Nations highlighted the agreements achieved throughout the years with the cooperation of the communities in the region.
There is a high level of vulnerability for communities as a result of losing their ancestral territories, lacking legal protection in their territories during the collective titling process. The issue of sanitation. They have been asking for the expansion of their territories for decades to restore what they had lost due to armed conflict and the presence of drug trafficking.
Another major concern is the growing levels of drug trafficking in the region.
To stop the cultivation of illicit crops, the peace agreement has to be implemented. It defined a trajectory, but the government has been acting too slowly. And there is even a threat that they want to bring back the fumigation strategy. They have asked the court to be more flexible about the implementation, but we believe this path is completely wrong.
Putumayo's indigenous nations are also fighting with the government over lack of prior consultation about their territories, especially regarding mining and oil drilling concessions.
The Department of Putumayo is currently being sold to multinationals like Amerisur, just like the rest of Colombia.
It is estimated that 80% of Putumayo department has been opened up for oil exploitation, mostly sold to multinationals such as the company Amerisur. Under the government of Iván Duque, the indigenous of Putumayo have seen at least 24 of their leaders killed for fighting to defend their territories.
A government minister has been arrested in Trinidad and Tobago on corruption allegations. Embattled Public Administration Minister Marlene McDonald is being questioned by police regarding an investigation into the distribution of over $1 million to 3 organizations from her ministry, but the funds were never used for that purpose. Police are also continuing their investigation into the Calabar Foundation matter, in which McDonald allegedly arranged for her partner to receive state housing back back in 2008. Meanwhile, officers are also probing concerns raised about nearly $600,000 paid by the Ministry of Community Development while she led that ministry under the Patrick Manning government. Barbados has welcomed Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta and his wife Margaret for a 3-day official visit. Prime Minister Mia Lee greeted the head of state at the Grant Lee Adams International Airport on Wednesday. A military 21-gun salute was performed while the national anthem was being played. Both countries will engage in bilateral talks and will partake in a business forum to sensitize officials on investment and trade opportunities in Kenya and Barbados. We head overseas now. Libyan authorities have deported more than 140 Sudanese migrants as part of a voluntary return program. This was the first group to be deported through a program aimed at returning home those migrants who volunteer to go back. Migrants in Libya have been facing safety challenges due to the ongoing conflict. Last month, dozens of migrants were killed and others injured when a migrant detention center in Tripoli was hit by a deadly airstrike. Libya is one of the main departure points for sub-Saharan migrants heading for Europe.
I'm going back to Sudan. I'm a married man and I have children. I came here to work and provide for my children, to go back to them. My children are in school, thank God. I have taken what God has destined for me, and I am now going back to my children to look for new work.
And 30 minors along with 2 babies are among 121 migrants stuck on board at a ship in the Mediterranean Sea. Malta and Italy has refused the ship entry to their port on Wednesday, prompting the NGO to release footage of the situation inside the vessel. Proactiva founder Oscar Camps on Monday called on EU members to accept the migrants who were rescued last week from 2 boats off the coast of Libya. Congolese and Rwandan authorities have intensified border controls to prevent the spread of the Ebola virus between the 2 countries. Several citizens of both countries have been turned away from the border post as security forces conducted strict border checks and surveillance. The flow of people commuting between the 2 countries has decreased in the past week, and some people complain at the matter police officers at the border are treating them.
We thought it was because of the epidemic, but now they are checking everyone. They ask you for your profession, identity card, and many other details. We had a lot of questions about it. We are calling on the authorities, asking why all these checks, if it's because of Ebola or if it's because of politics. At the moment, it's we, the ordinary people, who are suffering.
Coming up after the break, fans of British band The Beatles gathered at the famous London Abbey Road crosswalk to mark the 50th anniversary of their famous album cover. Don't go away. Malawi's Constitutional Court has started hearing a presidential election challenge by the country's opposition parties. The opposition parties are disputing the re-election of President Peter Mutharika, whom they accuse of winning through electoral fraud. The Malawi Congress Party and the United Transformation Movement have joined forces to challenge the results of the May 21st presidential elections. The hearing happens amidst protests by opposition supporters calling for the resignation of the country's Electoral Commission chairperson over regime claims.
We had come prepared, nonetheless, to commence cross-examination, and we're still doing the preliminaries, but we wish we had been given time to go over the material that would prevent it from going on.
Tensions remain high in Jammu and Kashmir as India puts the region on lockdown. The nationalist government, led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, controversially withdrew Jammu and Kashmir semi-autonomous status on Monday. The move has been condemned as undemocratic and caused major diplomatic outrage in neighboring Pakistan, which has historically claimed sovereignty over parts of the larger Kashmir region.
There is no one in sight on the roads. It doesn't look like a curfew. People are imprisoned in their own homes. I feel like the situation in Kashmir will get worse, and this could continue for the next 4 to 5 months. I feel like Kashmir is on the verge of burning. I feel like whatever the government has done for us is not right for us.
The escalation between the two states has caused concern as they share the world's most militarized de facto border. In the latest developments, Pakistan has expelled India's High Commissioner to Islamabad.
Pursuant to the decision of the National Security Committee yesterday, the Government of India has been told to withdraw its High Commissioner to Pakistan. The Indian government has also been informed that Pakistan will not be sending its High Commissioner designate to India. On 5th August 2019, Pakistan strongly condemned and rejected the announcements made by the Indian government regarding the Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, which is an internationally recognized disputed territory.
Floods brought by heavy rains and overflowing rivers have killed at least 33 people in western and southern India. Officials said 180,000 people were evacuated from their homes on Thursday. Rivers burst their banks in some parts of Maharashtra after authorities released water from dams that were full to maximum capacity. Monsoon rains from June to September caused deaths and mass displacement across South Asia every year. But they also deliver 70% of India's rainfall, crucial for farm output and economic growth. Over to the UK now, as Ryanair Pilots Union in Balpa is planning to strike for better working conditions. The first planned two-day strike will begin on August 22nd, with a second strike set to start on September 2nd. Just under 80% of union members voted for industrial action. Europe's largest budget airline, which only recognized unions in 2017, has announced impending job cuts. And lastly, fans of British band The Beatles gathered at the famous London Abbey Road crosswalk to mark the 50th anniversary of their famous album cover. Thousands of people assembled at the spot located near the intersection of Abbey and Grove End Roads, across the street from where the group made their first records. Studios, which were later renamed Abbey Road, together with the zebra crossing, were granted protection status by the government in 2010. And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Stefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.